The letter was dated March 18, 1899. It described a discovery in northern Egypt, a discovery no one had made until last week. The ink was fresh. The paper was flawless. But the handwriting matched a man who died over a century. So who sent it? How did he know what we just uncovered, and why is he asking me to continue his work? It arrived without warning. No return address, no indication of who had sent it or why. Just a sealed envelope, old and yellowed, left at the edge of Elias Ward's doorstep, like a memory someone wanted him to trip over. The ink on the front was delicate, almost hesitant, written with a fountain pen in a script no one used anymore. It was addressed simply, "To the future." Inside, a series of letters. The first one bore a date, March 18th, 1899. Elias didn't flinch at old paper or antique postmarks. That was his life. But what made his breath hitch was the content. The letter described in meticulous detail the discovery of an ancient burial chamber beneath the sands of northern Egypt, specifically near Abu Rawash, the exact same site that had just been uncovered a week ago in 2025. The location wasn't public yet. Not even the sponsors of the dig had released images. And yet, this letter described the chamber's interior, the cracked frescoes on the north wall, the inverted eye of Horus painted in gold, and the strange inscription that had baffled modern archaeologists. Elias knew it by heart. He had helped decode it 5 days earlier. But the letter described it with more clarity than his own notes. There were 3 more letters, all from the same hand, all addressed to someone referred to only as the Watcher. Each one referred to future events, sites, and findings, none of which had occurred yet. But if the first letter was right, Elias wasn't sure. He wanted to know what came next. He examined the ink. It had not faded. The paper, though aged, was not brittle. Under a microscope, the fibers checked out. Everything about the letters was authentic and impossible. There was a signature at the bottom, a name he'd never seen before. John Thorne. Curiosity led Elias into a flurry of research. Census archives, genealogical records, academic journals. He found the name, a scholar eccentric believed to have disappeared in 1901. No body, no grave, just gone. Elias stared at the last line of the first letter again. "You found the chamber, didn't you? Good. Then we're still in sync, and the language wasn't prophetic, it was conversational." As if the sender already knew Elias would find the letter after confirming the discovery. Not prediction, coordination. He sat for hours, letters spread across his desk, surrounded by open books, maps, and old archives. The ink spoke, to him louder than any voice. He couldn't dismiss it. Whoever John Thorne was, he knew things no man from 1899 should. But more than that, he was speaking to Elias directly. Or had Elias spoken to him first? The third letter mentioned, "A note you once left behind." Elias didn't remember writing anything, but the phrasing was unsettling. "When you leave the page behind, remember to hide it near fire. I found mine in the cabin's chimney." The word cabin was underlined. So was the phrase, "North of the stone well." Now, a location's a trail. Elias packed in silence, a flight to the UK, a train to Yorkshire, and a walk through fog-choked hills, where time moves slow and the wind sounds like it's remembering something. Locals knew the place, or rather, knew of it. "Old Thorne's place," one of them had said. "No one's gone near it since the war." No one. But someone had to have lit the fire, Elias thought, as he stared at the small trail of smoke still curling from the chimney when he arrived. The cabin stood alone, untouched by decades. The wood was dark, the glass opaque, the door unlocked. He stepped inside. Dust on the shelves, cobwebs in the corners, books scattered as if the owner had left mid-sentence. But no decay, the smell of wood and ash still fresh, and on the desk and the same paper and the same handwriting, a fifth letter, undated, unsealed, blank. For a moment, Elias stood frozen. Then, the fire popped behind him. The cabin groaned, and the window fogged slightly from the inside. Elias didn't move at first. The sudden fog on the window, forming from the inside out, made the small room feel like it was exhaling. Something, or someone, had shifted. The fifth letter still sat on the desk in front of him, blank, pristine. The same thick, aged paper. He reached for it slowly, expecting something, a word, a name, but it remained empty until he turned it over. There, in the same handwriting as the other letters, was a single line scribbled near the edge of the page, barely visible. "You're not early. You're not late. You're right where I was." No name, no date. Just that. Elias ran his thumb across the ink, still drying. That was impossible. The cabin creaked again, but it wasn't the sound of wood shifting. It was too rhythmic, like footsteps, heavy, deliberate, coming from above. Elias scanned the ceiling. Dust hung thick in the air, dancing in thin shafts of light coming through the window. There was a trap door just above the kitchen corner, slightly ajar. He climbed up using a half-broken chair, pushing it open slowly. The attic was small. Low ceiling, wooden beams, shelves filled with decaying books and glass jars. But at the far end there was a cot, and on it, a jacket, laid out carefully. With something in the breast pocket, he pulled it out, a notebook, leather-bound. Inside, more of the same handwriting. But this time, the entries weren't addressed to the watcher. They were personal, observational, and they mentioned him. Saw him today. Looked confused. Good. That means it's still working. Elias felt a chill crawl through his spine. The last entry stopped mid-sentence. If he's reading this, then the mirror has aligned. Which means what? Elias turned the page in blank. He flipped through the rest, nothing more, just aging paper. He closed the notebook and looked around. The air felt different, thicker. He moved back downstairs. The cabin had a subtle hum now, like distant wind trapped in the walls. He took out his own field recorder and hit record. Then he spoke. "This is Dr. Elias Ward. I'm inside what appears to be the home of John Thorne, the supposed author of the impossible letters. I've found evidence of recent activity. Heat in the chimney, fresh ink, and a notebook that references my presence before I arrived." He paused, then added, "Something here isn't following linear time, or someone is manipulating it." He explored the rest of the cabin. Every corner held pieces of a life frozen just short of vanishing, books on ancient scripts, maps with coordinates in pencil, and an entire wall filled with pinned letters, cutouts, symbols, like a detective's board but older, less frantic. It wasn't an obsession, it was a conversation, and Elias wasn't the first to step into it. Near the window, something caught his eye, a framed photograph, barely visible under the grime. He wiped it with his sleeve. It was Thorne, the man from the census photo, same beard, same eyes, standing in front of this very cabin. But next to him, blurry but unmistakable, was Elias. Same coat, same face, same eyes. The photograph slipped from his hands and cracked against the wooden floor. He picked it up. On the back, in faded pencil, someone had written a date, March 18th, 1899. That same date, Elias sat down. His hands were steady, but his thoughts weren't. He had seen the impossible before. Lost cities, hidden chambers, untranslatable scripts, but this was different. This wasn't a relic or a ruin. This was him. Somehow woven into a timeline he hadn't lived yet. Or maybe already had. He turned his attention back to the fifth letter, the blank one. He reached into his bag and took out a charcoal pencil, and then, unsure of why or what for, he wrote a single word. Here. Nothing happened, until the ink from the back of the page began to rise. Like reverse evaporation, letters surfacing, as if someone had written back and from the same page. Now underneath his word, a phrase appeared. I knew you'd choose that. Elias stood. The hum in the walls had stopped. The cabin was silent again, but not empty. There was a new object now, sitting neatly on the table, a small, silver mirror. Old, etched with symbols he recognized, ancient script from northern Mesopotamia, inverted, as if meant to be read not by light, but by reflection. Elias didn't sleep that night. He couldn't. The mirror sat on the table like a wound that wouldn't close. The etchings along its frame weren't decorative. They were purposeful, familiar too. He'd seen similar glyphs once, before carved into a ruined arch in eastern Anatolia. The site had been dismissed as indecipherable, pre-language, but he had always suspected otherwise. This mirror wasn't just old. It was intentional. A tool. Maybe a message. Maybe something worse. By morning he had a destination. One of the letters mentioned Border Town, not a place on any official map, but a colloquial name used by archivists and antiquarians to refer to a particular record house near the Scotland border. Not quite a library, not quite a museum, more a place where things went to be forgotten, safely. Elias knew who managed it, and more importantly, he knew the man had once worked with Thorn. The train ride north cut through a fog that looked like it had nowhere else to go. When Elias arrived, the old building looked abandoned. Ivy clawed at its stone walls, and the iron gate groaned like it hadn't been opened in years. But it was unlocked. He stepped inside and was met with the thick scent of paper, dust and a faint trace of something metallic, maybe ink, maybe blood, maybe time itself bleeding at the edges. He found the archivist deep in the stacks, cataloguing books that no one had checked out in decades. A thin man, half bent by age but sharp-eyed and alert. His name was Reginald Meeks. He wore a wool vest and a pocket watch and greeted Elias without surprise. You took your time, Meeks said, not looking up. Elias blinked. You were expecting me? Meeks nodded toward a table where a teacup sat, one already steeped. Thorn said you'd come eventually, or again. It's hard to tell with you two. That sentence hit like cold water. Elias sat across from him, placing the mirror between them. Meeks leaned forward, adjusting his glasses. Well, he murmured. There it is. I haven't seen that since 1963. Elias tilted his head. How's that possible? Meeks smiled faintly. Because that's when I gave it to you. Or rather, when you came asking for it. Same coat, same eyes. But that time, you looked older, worn. Like the mirror had taken something from you. Elias looked down at the object. It reflected nothing clearly. The light bent wrong. His own face came back twisted, blurred around the edges. Meeks reached into a drawer and pulled out a file. I started keeping notes after that day. Not about Thorn. About you, he slid the file over. Inside were sketches, transcriptions of conversations Elias didn't remember having, dates of visits that hadn't happened yet. One entry stood out. March 18th, 1899. The first exchange. said it was the only way to make it reach me in time, warned me not to trust the reflection. Elias reread that line twice and then he looked up. "What is this mirror?" Meeks leaned back. "It's not a mirror. It's a channel between fixed points in time, not like a door you walk through, but more like a message you leave, for yourself or someone like yourself. But it only works if the viewer already suspects the truth. Otherwise it just shows and nothing." Elias swallowed the thought. "So Thorne was using it to communicate forward?" Meeks nodded. "And backward. But more than that, he was trying to build a map. A temporal map. He believed certain moments in history were anchored, fixed like coordinates. He called them echoes, places where time folds in on itself and repeats. If you knew where those echoes were and when, you could leave messages inside them, hide knowledge, move information across centuries." Elias sat back. It was brilliant, mad, and disturbingly plausible. "But why me?" he asked. Meeks looked at him for the first time with something like fear. "Because you were the one who answered." Silence stretched between them. Meeks then pushed forward a final envelope. "This came the day before you arrived. No postage, no sender. Just this." Elias opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. His handwriting. A note. "Reginald, don't let me trust the mirror. Not fully. I always forget that part. He's already seen the 6th letter. Tell him not to read it alone." There was no signature, just a symbol at the bottom, a crude drawing of the mirror itself. With one side cracked, Elias looked up. "What 6th letter?" Meeks frowned. "You haven't found it yet?" And somewhere in the back of Elias's mind something clicked. The chimney, the heat, the gap in the wall near the hearth. He had missed something, and if he had already warned himself not to read it alone, then it wasn't just a message waiting, it was a trap. He didn't wait for the night train. Elias left Bordertown with the mirror in his bag and Meeks's warning echoing in his head. Tell him not to read it alone. But alone was the only way he had ever known how to read. Back in the cabin, the air felt heavier, like it remembered him, like it had been waiting. He moved straight to the hearth, kneeling where the stones curved inward. There, a gap, shallow, barely visible. He pried it open gently. Inside, wrapped in oilskin, was a 6th letter. The envelope was thicker than the others, worn differently, the seal unbroken. No name on the front, just the date. March 18th, 1899. Again, the same day, over and over. He stared at it for a long time before opening it. Part of him didn't want to. The other part already knew he had. The letter wasn't long. But every word was familiar, because it was in his voice and his tone, not the handwriting. That still belonged to Thorne, but the rhythm of the thoughts. It didn't feel like someone writing to him. It felt like someone remembering. Being him, you don't remember writing this, that's normal. Memory doesn't flow forward in places like this. It loops, breaks, reroutes. You've always found this letter. You'll always find it, just not always in time. Elias read the line again and then again. You're close, closer than I ever was. But if you're reading this, it means the mirror's active, and that's dangerous. Not because of what it shows, but because of what it wants. What it wants, Elias blinked. I saw it too. I saw the version of me that came after. He wasn't lost, he was rewritten. Like the mirror kept showing him what he wanted to be until he stopped knowing what he really was. Elias felt the room shift slightly, the light tilting, at an angle that didn't match the time of day. Shadows moved wrong. The mirror on the table pulsed faintly, not with light, but with intention. He kept reading. If you're still yourself, burn this letter. Now. Before it starts reflecting more than it should, his eyes reach the bottom of the page where something was written sideways, as if added in haste. The version of you I met didn't listen. He left me here. Elias looked up. For me. Cabin was silent. Still. But the fire had started again. He hadn't lit it. It was burning low, just enough to invite, not enough to warm. He took the letter to the hearth, held it over the flame, and paused. If what the letter said was true, then destroying it meant losing part of himself. A warning, yes, but also a piece of memory of truth. He hesitated, and then he saw it in the mirror. Not a reflection, a version of him, older, sharper, eyes hollowed by knowledge, but smile calm. That version nodded, as if approving, as if guiding. But then it blinked, and Elias didn't, because he hadn't blinked. His own eyes were still, and the man in the mirror was breathing. Elias dropped the letter into the fire. It curled, blackened, vanished. The mirror's surface cracked, just a hairline barely visible, but it shuddered like something inside was trying to hold its shape. He backed away, and suddenly the silence ended. Footsteps upstairs. Again, but heavier this time. Measured, not rhythm, purpose. He reached for the notebook he had found in the attic days earlier, or maybe hours. Flipped to the last page. New ink. Fresh. You. Made the right choice, but they'll still come looking. Below that, a sketch, a location, coordinates, one he recognized instantly, the ruins in southern Turkey, an old fortress, abandoned. He had been there once, but found nothing. Or maybe he hadn't known what to look for. He stared at the mirror again. The cracked edge seemed darker now, as if it was bleeding shadow. He placed it back into his bag carefully, wrapped it tight. Whatever it was, whatever it held, it wasn't finished with him yet, but he needed distance and answers. He left the cabin without looking back. As he reached the hill's edge, the fog behind him swallowed the structure completely, like it had never been there. Only the wind remained, but even that felt and watched. The ruins were just as Elias remembered them, dry stone walls, half swallowed by the hillside, silent under a sky too wide for answers. He'd been here years ago, looking for traces of a forgotten kingdom that left no name, only whispers in clay. Back then, it had seemed like another dead end. But now, with the coordinates from the notebook and the fractured mirror wrapped tightly in his pack, the place felt different, like it had been waiting to be seen properly or remembered. He moved slowly through the broken archways, past collapsed chambers and shallow carvings weathered by time. The sun was falling, stretching shadows long and thin, like fingers reaching backward. He stopped at what once was the inner sanctum, a circular chamber with no roof and a single stone pedestal at its center. Atop it, nothing, but around the base, faint grooves, like something had once been placed there. Something round, reflective. Elias pulled the mirror from his bag. The cracked surface pulsed faintly in the fading light. He set it down gently onto the pedestal. The temperature dropped instantly. Not dramatically, but enough to feel it. The air thickened. The stone under his fingers began to hum, and then it started to show not a reflection, a memory, not his, someone else's, a handwriting by candlelight, a map being burned intentionally, a voice, distorted but urgent, whispering a name. Elias. He stepped back. The mirror adjusted. Now it showed a younger man seated at the same pedestal, drawing something in a notebook. The same notebook. A gust of wind flipped its pages. Elias recognized the scene. It was him. But from the first visit, Years ago, before the letters, before any of it. The version of him that had walked away thinking there was nothing here. But that version wasn't alone. There was another figure in the shadows of the ruins, barely visible. Watching, Elias felt a chill spread across his spine. He looked around now and nothing empty. But when he turned back to the mirror, the image had changed again. Now, it was Thorn, older, standing beside the same pedestal, staring directly into the mirror and speaking. But there was no sound, just his mouth moving, until the words began to write themselves along the edge of the glass. You weren't the first to follow. The loop, just the first to get this far. The writing paused, then continued. We needed someone who wouldn't look away. Then slowly another sentence formed, this time in Elias's own handwriting, and I didn't. He stepped closer. The mirror darkened again, but something was still faintly visible beneath the surface. A name, the same one from the very first letter. John Thorn. But now, the face had changed. It was his. Older, weathered, wiser. But he staggered back. No, he whispered aloud, voice low, cracking. No, that's not. But it was. The loop hadn't just pulled him in. It had been built by him, or a version of him, or the version he was becoming. He looked down at his own hands, then at the notebook, then at the mirror. The surface had begun to crack further now, thin lines running out like spider webs. It wasn't meant to hold the image for long, but not forever. Just long enough to deliver what needed to be passed forward. He reached into the side pocket of his bag and pulled out a single sheet of paper. Blank. He took the charcoal pencil and he wrote, "If you found this, it means the mirror still works, and be careful. Don't trust what you recognize too quickly. Some reflections lie, some tell you what you want to be. But if you're reading this, I'm already gone. And maybe you are too." He folded the letter, pressed it flat, left it beneath the pedestal. He didn't take the mirror with him. He didn't need to. Whatever it was meant to do, it already had. As he walked away, the wind shifted. The mirror shattered behind him. Not loudly, softly, like something exhaling after holding its breath for centuries. By the time Elias reached the ridge, the ruins behind him were bathed in twilight, quiet, peaceful, almost unmarked. But he knew better. He took one last look back and smiled. Not because he had solved the mystery, but because for the first time, he wasn't part of someone else's story. He was part of his own, and if someone else finds that pedestal and sees a face that looks a little too familiar, I hope they stop and ask, whose eyes are looking back? Because some mirrors don't reflect who you are. They show who you were supposed to become. Maybe this wasn't the last message. Maybe it was just the first. So, until the next archive, maybe Thorn was never trying to change the future. Maybe he was just trying to leave a light on for the next one who got lost. If the loop is still open, then there's always someone else out there, reading, following, writing back. And if that someone is already holding the next letter, then it's only a matter of time until I find it, or maybe it finds me first.